Under Hugo Chavez, Venezuela transformed into a dictatorship, and China played a big role. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. For years, Western observers called Venezuelan socialism an alternative to American capitalism. It was an economic miracle. Some democratic socialist U.S. politicians were also enamored with Venezuela. Bernie Sanders even said, these days, the American dream is more apt to be realized in South America, in places such as Venezuela. Who's the banana republic now? He later removed that from his website. I wonder why. But the Venezuelan economic miracle was a lie. After socialist dictator Hugo Chavez took over, he gradually began transforming one of South America's most prosperous countries into a dictatorship. His successor, Nicolás Maduro, made the transformation complete. But from the beginning, China had its hand in the chaos. China is creating a global coalition of dictators to challenge global democracy. But there is resistance. Leopoldo López is an opposition leader from Venezuela and one of the loudest voices calling for a democratic front to unite against the authoritarian menace. He joins me now from Spain, where he's living in exile. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you and your audience.
There are a lot of Americans who believe all of Venezuela's problems are caused by the U.S., that Hugo Chavez was a great leader. What would you say to those people?
Well, that's simply not true. The majority of Venezuelans, large majority of Venezuelans, are very clear that the hardships, the humanitarian crisis, the economic despair, the insecurity, the food shortages, the lack of electricity, of running water, has one person who is responsible, Nicolás Maduro. So that's propaganda on the part of the regime, trying to present the United States and the sanctions as the source of the problems for the Venezuelan people, and that is not true, but it's also not true that the Venezuelan people think that way.
Did Venezuela, when it became more authoritarian, did it happen quickly or was it a slow process?
Well, there were things that happened very quickly, but the rolling out of the dictatorship took some time. Let me explain myself. When Hugo Chavez was elected in 1998, he promoted what was called a National Constituent Assembly. And within the first year of his presidency, he changed the constitution, and he also changed all the members of the entire set of institutions of the Venezuelan state. So within a year, he had a new constitution, a new Supreme Court, a new electoral board, a new attorney general, a new defensor of the people, all that were people politically aligned and loyal to Hugo Chavez. So that was the beginning. And then throughout the years, we started to see how liberties were being taken away from different sectors until we clearly realized that Venezuela had become a dictatorship. It took maybe too much time. It took at least 13 years until the majority of the Venezuelans assumed that what was happening in our country was clearly a dictatorship.
What would happen to you if you tried to go back to Venezuela?
Well, Maduro has already asked for my extradition. I am currently in Spain, and he has asked for my extradition in order to take me back to prison. I presented myself voluntarily after a warrant for my arrest came out in February of 2014. I spent 7 years with my freedom confined, of which 4 years were in a military prison. Then I was taken to house arrest, then back to military prison, then back to house arrest, and finally I spent 1.5 years in the Spanish embassy. And I was sentenced to 14 years of imprisonment for promoting protests against the dictatorship of Nicolás Maduro. What would happen to me? I would either go to prison or be killed, as Maduro has said.
Now, you've said that the problem with Venezuela is a global problem. What do you mean by that?
Well, many people ask the question, why is Maduro still in power? And there might be different answers to that question. However, I believe that the main reason why Maduro is still in power is because he receives the support of mighty countries that are supporting in different ways. These countries are China, Russia, Turkey, Iran, and in our case, Cuba. They all support Maduro through different mechanisms. They support him by supplying military equipment, support with military personnel, with intelligence, with financing, with money laundering, with the extraction and commerce of illegal gold from oil contracts, diplomacy support at all levels, from the Security Council at the UN all the way down to every single multilateral international forum. And that is, in my view, the main reason why he's still in power. We, the democratic sectors, we have received support, political support, diplomatic support, but by no means is equivalent to the type of support that the regime is getting from these mighty countries that are expanding authoritarianism, not just in Venezuela, but in many other countries in all 5 continents.
What's China's interest in Venezuela?
Well, the interest of China started by being a commercial interest, an interest by giving loans to the Chavez regime and then to the Maduro regime. Then they became very active in infrastructure. They became very active in exporting towards Venezuela. They created a fund of billions and billions of dollars that was renovated every 2 years in order to lock the imports of Venezuela to China. And the geopolitical interest of China is very clear, as it is doing in Africa, and it's the same way it's doing it in other places in Latin America, is to have a strong economic presence in these countries, in a way in which these countries are locked financially to the determination of China. So the loans and the economic relationship has ended up being a dependency relationship between Venezuela and China, as it has happened with many African countries and many other Latin American countries.
So what can be done when Maduro is backed up by a powerful country like China?
Well, the first thing is that the mighty free countries need to open their eyes. I believe that it's not clear for policymakers, for governments, and for the public opinion at large that we are facing a global threat. And we are, and this is not an exaggeration. And I can tell you from the first trench of fighting against the dictatorship how important is for the stability of this dictatorship, the support of these other countries. So opening the eyes to the fact that there is a rise in authoritarianism, that there is an expansion activity and strategy of all these countries, that they are working in a network fashion, and that they will not stop. So I believe that the most important thing is to realize that there is a problem, that there is a threat, that there is an expansion that is being promoted. And secondly, of course, to support free and democratic movements in countries that are today facing the hardships of living under dictatorships.
Well, so how specifically do you think activists and democratic leaders should respond to the rise of authoritarianism in the world?
No, of course there needs to be a common voice, but very plural, very different, very diverse in calling for freedom. I understand that freedom today is not the same concept that we had 25 years ago, after the fall of the Berlin Wall and all the enthusiasm that was in the entire world about democracy and market economy and the expansion of freedoms and the respect for human rights. That's no longer the case. The reality is that today there is a larger part of the population living under authoritarian regimes. There are more dictatorships. There are less democracies. And unfortunately, democracies are undergoing an insecurity crisis within their public opinion. Many people in Europe, in North America, are insecure about their own democratic system. And that has created a situation where many people question the need to have an expansion of democracy and freedom all over the world. I believe, on the contrary, that there needs to be today more than ever a commitment of public opinion, parliaments, governments, NGOs, media, economic sectors to promote democracy and freedom. And at the spearhead of this initiative, we need to have activists, leaders, women, men of all different sectors join together in order to promote the fight against dictatorships, in order to promote the ideas of freedom, in order to promote mechanisms of coordination, of communication, and to push back against this wave that is rising all over the world of authoritarianism.
So how do you think a future democratic Venezuela should approach China?
Well, I think we need to do it with respect, with the fact that there might be a legitimate economic relationship. There might be another one that is not clear. So I think that we need to be very clear that we are Democrats, that we believe in the rule of law, and any commitment that has been made legally needs to be recognized. I think that China could be part of the solution if it respects the fact that we want to be, because historically we have been an independent, democratic, and free country. What we are not willing to support is an economic relationship that it's also forcing a model where the rule of law, the respect for human rights, and the respect for freedoms are undermined. So I think that there could be a relationship if there is respect with the fact that Venezuela has been and needs to be a democratic and free country. I also believe that it's not true that it's best for any country, for any nation in the world to be under authoritarian regimes and not democratic regimes. I believe in democracy. I think that's the best system for anybody in any corner of the world. However, there is a huge challenge, which is that democracies need to deliver. It's not enough to believe in democracies theoretically. It's not enough to support the values of democracy. We need to have democracies that deliver in well-being, in prosperity, in opportunities, in the capacity to take millions of people out of poverty and to diminish the inequalities that we are seeing all over the world.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity and appreciate the attention of your audience. Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.